This is the Blueprint Course Refresher Review for second year HVAC students preparing for their block exam. In lesson number 1, we talked about orthographic views. So these are 2D views that show length, width, or height, and each view can only show 2 of those at a time. We learned that there were 6 main orthographic views and they all belonged in a proper position. And we used the glass box theory to demonstrate those planes folding out towards you to give you those views. In addition to the 6 main orthographic views, we had 2 other types of 2D views. So we had an auxiliary view. When we have a slanted surface, we can create an auxiliary view parallel to that slanted surface that shows us the true size and shape of the view. And we also have section cuts. So section cuts are another type of 2D view, and in a section cut, you cut the part open using a cutting plane line so that you can see what's inside of it. You have to pay attention to the way that the arrows point, because that's telling you which way you're looking in at the part. Okay, in lesson 7, we're jumping to 7 because we're just talking about views. We covered pictorial views. So instead of 2D views, we're going to be looking at 3D views. Pictorial views add depth to our part. The first kind that we had was an isometric. So a corner faces you, and then the receding lines go back at 30 degrees. Next, we had an oblique. So in an oblique, one of the faces is directly towards you, and then the other lines usually go back at 45 degrees. And there were 2 types of those, remember, cabinet and cavalier. Cavalier was the full length one drawn, and cabinet was when it was only drawn to half its length, and it made it more realistic looking. Perspective drawing is the most realistic of the 3 types of pictorials, and it uses a vanishing point. So as you're looking at the view, things get smaller further back. Okay, then in lesson number 2, we talked about the alphabet of lines. So take a pause here, go over your line types. Remember, our object line is the main one that we used. We have dimension lines, our cutting plane lines. The one that people forget about sometimes is that leader line or the arrow pointing things out with notes. So just pause that and go over your alphabet of lines again. And you might get a drawing that shows a bunch of different line types in use all on one drawing. Okay, lesson number 3, we talked about dimensioning, and the purpose of dimensioning was to give size and location of the part and its features. When we talked about dimensioning, we also talked about tolerance, so how much bigger or smaller a part can be than its given dimension. In lesson 4, we talked about title blocks, revision blocks, and some other information blocks on your drawings, such as zoning and general and specific notes. So our title block was in the bottom right-hand corner of our drawing usually, and it identified what our drawing was and its number. The revision block called out changes. And we talked about full construction sets and the divisions within those construction sets. So we had architectural, structural, mechanical, and electrical. HVAC is usually found under mechanical. If it's a really big project, they might have plumbing separately, but most of your HVAC information will be under mechanical. Of course, it's going to tie into the electrical, the architectural, and the structural, but specific HVAC info is in mechanical. We talked about some of the different types of drawings. So we had a site drawing, so everything going on outside of the property. Shop drawings, so things that you buy that are already built. Sketches, and as-builts for on the job and after the job is completed. Some other labels or view names that you might come across were elevations. So looking at it front on the side of something, so the outside of the building or the inside looking at the wall. And a plan view is just any of the plans that you're looking down from above. So a floor plan is the main one. A site plan is also one. A reflected ceiling plan, all of those. Those are all different types of plans. In lesson 5, we talked about 2 different types of drawings. The first was a detail drawing. So a detail drawing gives you all the necessary information to manufacture one part. You can have multiple pages, multiple views of that one part, but it's just to manufacture one part and in any quantity of that part that you want. An assembly drawing, though, takes a bunch of detail and purchase parts and puts them together. And anytime you have an assembly drawing, you have to have a bill of material or parts list, and it identifies the part itself, its name, how many are required, sometimes the material. And those parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they have to have balloon callouts on the drawing. So when we looked at our assembly drawing, we would see these balloons calling out each of the pieces, and they would match to our bill of material. Okay, in lesson 6, we talked about scale. So we can have enlarged, 1-to-1, or reduced. So enlarged, we'd take a little bolt and blow it up bigger to see the details. In reduced, we'd take a house and shrink it down to make it fit into our border. And 1-to-1 is just full size. We could do imperial and we could do metric scaling. So metric scaling was millimeters, and it was pretty straightforward. Whatever was written on the end of the scale, whether it was 1-to-1, 1-to-2, or 1-to-5, that's how much each of the little tick marks were worth. So they were either worth 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters, or 5 millimeters each, and we just had to count how many tick marks. The imperial one was a little more work. It talked about feet and inches. So the big part of the ruler were our feet, and we had some going from the left and some going from the right, so we had to make sure we were using the proper scale. And then the little section on each end of it were our inches, and each of those tick marks made up a fraction of an inch. And remember, that depended on what scale we were actually using, how much each of those tick marks were worth. Okay, in lesson number 8, we looked at symbols. So on a drawing, you want to look for a legend, and your legend will give you symbols and what each one is. Some of them, of course, we went over quite a bit, and just ones that they would expect you to know, things like a switch or a light, just general things. So take a few minutes, go back through your notes and check on some of your different symbol types. And the last thing that we did, we just talked about some of the other reference information you're going to find on your drawings. So how to follow callouts for elevations. So remember the number on the top of the elevation, the section, and the detail. That's the name of that elevation, section, or detail. The number on the bottom is the page you go to find it. All doors and windows have a call-out number on them, which you will find referenced in a schedule. We have our revision call-outs. We have note call-outs, general and specific. And we could have finishes called out using these finish schemes instead of putting all the info on them all. So that's the end of the Blueprint course refresher review for second year HVAC students preparing to write their block exam. Good luck, everybody. If you have any questions, email me or drop by to see me. Take care.